What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace a faulty alternator in Nissan Altima 2000, but this does apply to older models. So we're talking about any car made from 2000 and it's a front wheel drive. Most of them this video will apply, and you would learn, maybe, I hope so, that you would learn a few things from this video. Now, when working on the electrical system of any car, it's recommended to remove the positive connector and leave the negative one because that's the grounded. Now, when working on the alternator, this is an older model, so you have the pulley tensioner, the same thing as the alternator. So you have to break these two bolts loose, and therefore the alternator is going to move. Now, when removing the connectors, you have a 12mm connector, the positive, then you have a clip, and you have a ground by a 10mm, which you just remove. Now, you have a 14mm that goes across from each side of the two alternator ears that hold the alternator in place. Now, if you want better and easier access, you can remove this bolt and then take the wiring harness away from you. That way it's not in the middle when you're trying to work on other bolts. You can just put it aside for now, and then later on bolt it back on. Now, when taking the bottom bolt of the alternator, you're going to need a breaker bar. This bolt is really tight, and it's a 14mm, and I just have an adapter to a 1.5 to 3/8. And when breaking the bolt, using the breaker bar is easier than a ratchet, plus you won't damage your ratchet. And then when it's all broken down, you can change to a ratchet to make it coming out a lot easier. And if you want, you can remove the oil if it's in the middle. Put it aside for now. Now, I changed to a bigger ratchet so I can get a little more of an extension, so I wouldn't be hitting this radiator hose, and it makes it easier when taking out the bolt. Now, when the bolt's all broken loose, you can either take it and put it aside for now so you won't lose it. So coming to the next side, there is going to be another 14mm bolt right here behind the pulley that you're going to have to break loose, and that goes to the other ear of the alternator. Now, as you can see, the alternator is starting to move a little, and if the bolt is all ready, then you can go in with your ratchet to make it easier.
Now this bracket is going to be in the middle, so if you want to remove it and save you some troubles, it's just a 14 millimeter and this is a 12 millimeter. Now that you have the whole alternator exposed, you have to remove this 112 millimeter. That's for the tensioner. All the way from the third ear of the alternator. And then put it aside. Now you still have that one last bolt at the bottom, and you're gonna have to put some tension in it and screw it all the way out. And the alternator is loose, but you still have the belt connected to the alternator, so you have to grab it and twist it out of the grip. Now you have to wiggle it out and make sure you got the right spot to get it out. And usually this line is going to be in the middle, but if you just give it a little pull, it's going to come right out. Now when putting new parts, you got to make sure you have the correct part. So for example, you can check that you have the 2 ears, and then you have the same connections as you do with the old one. That way you're not almost done with the job and figured out that they're not the same connections. Now the same way to pull it in, gotta find the right Now start by pulling the serpentine belt back on, and then you're gonna have the one pulley tensioner, but in this case it's just the tensioner in this case, which is a 12 millimeter that goes in one of the ears. And then you have, now after a few minutes of trying to get the bolts in on each side, I realized that the best way is to pull it out away from the engine and then put the back bolt in, and then the front one will just go right on. Really easy, really simple. Then you have to put the bracket back on, the bracket that we took, and it has this 114 millimeter bolt. And then it has this nut over here, and it was 12 millimeter. Not super tight, but don't get it loose. Now, with the rest, gotta make sure you can screw it in by hand, and then the rest you can go in with your wrench. Now you don't want to over tight this bolt, you just want to get it in and make sure that it's good and that, you know, the threads are getting. Now you want to go to the next one and get it a little bit in. you want to get both of them so they tighten at the same time. Now when you're almost done with that one, come back to the other side. Now you wanna set the tension before you do anything else, so that way you don't have you can tighten the main bolts where the alternator is going to be. Now when tightening the belt, what you do is you twist it, and if it can go more than halfway, then it's not tight enough. So you keep on tightening it until your belt can't be turned more than half a turn. But I already have it marked with a little piece of wire that I wrapped around. That way I know where it goes back, and it makes it easier. If you want, or you can just get a Sharpie or anything that you can mark it and leave a mark. It makes it easy for you. That way you know where it goes. And you don't, the reason why you don't over tighten it is because if you over tighten it too much, then the bearings inside of it go bad, and that's what the main causes of alternators and why they go bad. So that's why it's not a good idea. So you want to just check it and see that's about it. That's what you want. It's enough. It's tight enough, but not too tight. Still got a little play. And then just tighten this one. That way it can't move anymore. And then don't forget the ones on the bottom. You have the 214. Now these have to be a little, that's good. The other side. There's not a lot of room to work with, so whatever you can. Maybe a wrench will work better. But this is good enough. Now you can start putting the wiring harness back in, and then you remember that you have this 10mm right here. And then you have the three connections. You have the the clip connection that goes right there, and then you have the 12mm connection that goes to the main power source of the alternator. And then last but not least, the ground wire, which is a 10mm. Don't forget to tighten both the ground wire and to finish it off, I removed this little temperature sensor right here, so if you plug that back in, and your oil dipstick. And that's how you replace an alternator on a Nissan Altima 2000.